We will now move on to the panel discussion segment of this webinar. Today's discussion topic is Accelerating IoT Deployment in the Post-Pandemic Era. I have with me today representatives that span the full spectrum of the IoT industry. And your moderator for this session will be Vincent. Over to you, Vincent.
Thank you, Kani. I have with me today a number of esteemed panelists from ESG, NYP, ST Engineering, and SPTEL as well. So I think before I begin, I would like to give some time to each of the individual speakers to be able to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Yifeng from ESG. Yifeng, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Yifeng from Enterprise Singapore. Within Enterprise Singapore, I cover the ICT industries. So I help the companies within that sector to grow within Singapore as well as overseas. So really glad to be here today with this panel. Vincent.
Thank you, Yifeng. And I would like next for Teck Bing from NYP to introduce himself.
Okay, hi. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, my name is Teck Bing, and I'm from Nanyang Polytechnic School of Engineering, Smart Connected Solutions Center. Okay, I have been working on wireless connectivity for more than 10 years. Okay, in these few years, I'm actually tasked to concentrate on LPWAN, which stands for Low Power Wide Area Network, such as LoRaWAN. Okay, I'm also engaging actively with industry to understand their problems and also their needs on IoT deployment. Thank you so much, Vincent.
Thank you, Teck Bing. Next, we will have Kok Hua from ST Engineering to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kok Hua. I'm from ST Engineering. So I take care of the IoT business at ST Engineering. At ST Engineering, our IoT focus are primarily on smart city type applications, such as smart street light, smart metering, smart waste, etc. Prior to ST, I was at StarHub heading up the IoT business, and before that, I was at EDMI, a global company in the smart metering industry, actually one of the early IoT verticals. So I'm very honored to participate in the panel discussion, and I look forward to a lively exchange of views and ideas later on. Thank you. Back to you, Vincent.
Thank you, Kok Hua. And last but not least, we would like to invite Chin Chow from SPTEL to introduce himself.
Thanks, Vincent. I'm Chin Chow from SPTEL. I'm Deputy Director for Product Management and Product Owner of the portfolio of services that we launched. So SPTEL has launched our software-defined and business-class digital network at this event. So for this panel, I will be sharing more information regarding our award-winning IoT as a service platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Chin Chow. So now I would like to proceed on with the panel discussion. I think earlier on I've mentioned that we have seen a widespread IoT adoption even during this pandemic period. And because of this pandemic period, I think the questions on a lot of people's mind now is that, is there a particular sector, right, in which IoT has actually been adopted a lot more than any other sector? And how has IoT actually helped this sector? So I think I would like to direct the first question to Yifeng from ESG. Maybe you can talk a bit more about how IoT adoption which particular sector in IoT adoption do you see has increased during this period?
Thanks, Vincent. Actually, I would think about my response in three areas. And maybe I'll talk about the last one first, because I saw on the chat panel that somebody was asking about the cybersecurity. So actually, one of the areas that will be interesting is coming up is actually the complementary businesses for IoT. And one of them, you have also mentioned it just now in your introduction, which is actually cybersecurity. Right. So that is the sort of the last one that I think would be interesting that's coming up. But back to IoT itself, I think there is the immediate term responses, and we see this very strongly in healthcare IoT, in track and trace related solution, as well as in asset management tracking kinds of solutions. And we think that some of these immediate needs are likely to actually have some stickiness in them, as we move into the new normal, right? As users start to think about not just immediate compliance to regulatory requirements, but as they think about new normal, how do they co-live with the safe measures while continue to be able to do some of this monitoring. But at the same time, even as we move into new normal, the underlying reasons why, the underlying reasons for why IoT is important will continue to shine through, perhaps even more, right? As companies think about how do they build resilience into their supply chain and therefore data in terms of monitoring the different sources from different sensors, different devices is even more and more important. As companies think about how they squeeze more efficiencies out of their existing processes. So just now you talked about manufacturing, I think those will be really, really important. And finally, as customers, users, businesses try to find new value to supply to their customers in the face of meeting new safety requirements, for example, right? And therefore, definitely more IoT would be deployed. So we have seen things that's happening in the hospitality sector, where many operations such as check-in, check-out, room sanitization management, those have been replaced by sensors and by automation, and we see this accelerating even more. Thank you, Vincent.
I think those are very good points, especially when I think our government is also mentioning that we are on track, in fact, towards phase 3, right? And I think part of our ability to be able to transit from phase 2 to phase 3 is going to need a lot of more ways in which we can safely distance ourselves in both retail and hospitality sector. What about in the areas of urban farming, telemedicine? Maybe this question I can direct this to Kok Hua from ST Engineering, because I understand that in the areas of telemedicine, urban farming, these are new areas, especially for urban farming. We have a new target of 30 by 30, right? So maybe you can share a bit more of how the IoT can help in these sectors.
Okay, so at ST, we have seen requests from customers to look at some new areas driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. I think COVID-19 has caused disruption in the food supply chain. And a lot of times, I think now countries are looking at how to build a more resilient food supply. So urban farming is one area they're looking at. In fact, coincidentally, yesterday, the news just came out that SFA, Singapore Food Agency, together with HDB, has awarded like 9 sites, primary rooftop sites, of all the multi-story car parks of HDB for urban farming. So that is smart agriculture, one of the IoT vertical as well. So I think with that, I think you're going to see increased use in IoT in this area, primarily for, let's say, pest detection, optimizing the water and electricity usage, and trying to increase the crop yield. So these are areas I think you'll see an increase in use in IoT. On telemedicine, I think from the news you heard that right now with the risk, government is trying to minimize the risk. So minimizing patients going to hospital or visiting the doctor. So telemedicine is an area that is getting increased attention, and that's another area that I think you'll see greater adoption of IoT there. Yeah, thank you.
I think those are very important points, and I think the number one things on everyone's minds as well: where are the new jobs that are being created? Right? Because if you mention telemedicine, urban farming, and the application of IoT in these different sectors, it means that there is actually a lot of opportunities for everyone as well. So this leads me to probably another burning question that everyone has on their mind. What would then be the biggest barrier of entry when it comes to developing various kinds of IoT solutions, no matter what kind of sector it might be? Maybe I would like to direct this question next to Teck Ming from MYP.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Vincent. Okay. IoT is essential in today's modern digital business, especially post-COVID-19. Okay, there are many elements in an IoT solution, Okay, to me, the biggest barrier is connectivity. Okay, to be more precise, wireless connectivity. How we can send data from sensor to a gateway wirelessly. To ensure success in an IoT adoption, okay, there's a strong need for reliable network connectivity as the size of the IoT market grows exponentially. Okay, without the connectivity to transfer the IoT data to the right place for analytics, okay, is simply unworkable. Okay, LoRaWAN, for example, can be the solution for this wireless connectivity. Okay, thank you, Vincent.
So speaking of connectivity, maybe Chincha would like to share a bit more about how with SPTel's IoT as a service platform, how would that actually help address this barrier of entry?
Okay, thanks, Vincent and Dr. Lim. I think for most IoT developers, they tend to focus very much on the hardware for sensing and then the software that the end customer will use. But in between these two parts, connectivity and other parts of the infrastructure, the integration and the interoperability is actually quite complex. So for SPTel's IoT as a service, what we have done is that we have gone quite deep into looking into the various solution components to put together a platform that is highly integrated, yet able to offer in parts as well. Another barrier of to overcome is also, the latency and compute. I tend to talk about these two things together because for autonomous IoT projects, you need compute and low latency, right? And that is very hard to come by. Even though Singapore is a small country, right? But every microseconds that you can save, right, will help with your IoT projects. So we have our edge computing capabilities on our IoT as a service platform. So that helps the developers to scale the compute at the same time enjoy ultra low latency because we have our hubs island-wide to really give you that true edge. Thanks.
I think the point on latency is a good one. And I think the fact that if you could enable microsecond kind of a latency or even close to none, that will unlock a lot of possibilities. Already during this COVID situation, we have seen people are beginning to see that you can remotely work. Imagine being able to remotely control a tractor, control an excavator, or even do a surgery remotely, right, with zero or close to zero latency. So this means that there's actually a lot of different things that people actually need to pick up in terms of skill sets to be able to enable them to survive in this new normal, as well as to take up IoT in different sectors. So maybe my next question, I'd like to go back to Teck Ming. From an education standpoint, what do you think should be included in terms of IoT in today's curriculum? In fact, are there any programs in which companies can actually work with education institutes like NYP to actually develop such IoT projects too?
Okay, thank you so much, Vincent. Okay, in NYP, okay, besides being an ACAD staff, lecturing of course, okay, I'm also expected to contribute actively on industry project. Okay, our key mission is still to train our learner, okay, whether is it from diploma, and recently we have also adult learner. Okay, the skill set, the so-called the industry exactly need. Okay, however, the skill set keep on evolving. And we believe by actively working closely with industry, okay, we have the first-hand information to know exactly what skill set is actually still in demand from the industry. Okay, in NYP here, we have this IoT Open Innovation Committee here. Okay, in this vibrant committee, for example, okay, we share the IoT landscape in Singapore via seminar or workshop. Okay, we also have this Skill Future series course that will be able to equip the learner the skill set that the industry actually need nowadays. Okay, thank you so much, Vincent.
That's, I think, great news for people who are intending to probably do a career switch or maybe to take on a new job role. And I think with job role evolution happening within organizations, I think organizations are really, really worried about the cost as well. So maybe if we could ask Chin Chow again, how do you think organizations can actually speed up or even drive their IoT deployment without having to worry too much about the cost?
Okay, thanks, Vincent. So for SPTel, our IoT as a service, as the name implies, is as a service. You can actually, subscribe at low cost in order to deploy your IoT solutions, right? And I would say that at this juncture, we have a trial program going on that is working in conjunction with ESG, right? And the first part of it is to give IoT solution partners a free trial, right? That they can test out their sensors and their applications on our platform in SPTel's Innovation Lab, right? Free of charge. This will give them the confidence to say that their solution actually works on our platform, right? And then they can go into a pilot period where they can actually deploy it on site for the solution. So I think this will give organizations a lot of confidence in IoT solutions and IoT platform in general. Right? Yeah, thanks.
I think that really addressed a worry, on many of these organizations' mind, especially for SMEs who are probably looking for grants as well, right, in build adopt IoT. I think the other thing that could also looked into is in terms of what Teck Bing mentioned earlier on, skills future, because I think the other cost is training costs. How exactly are we able to tap and unlock more talent in these areas? Maybe Teck Bing, if you could mention a bit more about your skills future series course that's being offered by Nanyang Poly. How exactly does that work?
Okay, we actually so-called deliver quite regular. For example, we have this LP when making it work. Okay, in fact, in October, we are going to have 3 runs. Okay, so basically, you can just send me an email if you are keen to do this skill future. And basically, in this so-called skill future series, we are going to hold your hand and then to show you exactly how you can send data from the sensor all the way to the cloud. Okay, so basically this is how this skill future work in NYP.
Wow, that's great to be able to have someone to hold your hands and walk you through, right, all the way. Yeah, I think some of our participants have been rather interested in that, and probably they might actually email you after this panel discussion. So I think all in all, right, we have seen the whole spectrum in terms of how IoT is being deployed, and we have seen certain sectors are actually flourishing better than others. And I think in terms of IoT, earlier on, Kang Ni also mentioned in the opening that the community is actually important in order for us to be able to build up the entire IoT ecosystem. So what we can basically do is that I would like to hear as well from each of the panelists, probably beginning with ESG, Yifeng, how do you think the stakeholders can be engaged in this IoT community, and how can we actually drive Singapore towards this greener and smarter and more efficient smart city?
That's a big question. I think there are maybe, again, 3 ways to think about this. One is it's an old method, but it is still true today, which is actually partnerships between companies that are actually within the ecosystem, so that they can offer complete solutions. Because each of them are good at their specific area, but as business owners, users are looking at complete solutions. So coming together to form complete solutions would be one way that the ecosystem starts to come together. The second part, I think, in terms of building the talent pipeline, I think plays also an important part in injecting new talent into the ecosystem and builds that community up. And in that talent building process, of course, the IHLs will be a key stakeholder in this. And to me, I think they are not just about building graduates that know how to use the technology, but also potentially future tech leaders that can drive, develop, build new solutions and solve business problems for our businesses. And that would then really enrich the ecosystem. And finally, platforms like the ones that the SPTEL is building, right? It's a great way for younger IoT companies to easily test bed and try out their solution, focusing on their solution while a partner like SPTEL takes care of the backbone infra. And through this kind of platform, again, it is a way for the different IoT businesses to also interact with each other, and maybe new sparks would also emerge. That's where I think some of the things that can be done. Vincent.
Thank you. Maybe for Kok Hua, in terms of stakeholder, I do understand that ST Engineering has been in the forefront in helping startups as well. Maybe you can share a bit on how you can help in the community of IoT ecosystem.
Okay, so I think it's a big question, like what Yvonne has mentioned. I think we at ST Engineering, we believe that no one company can solve all the IoT problems, and no one have a complete solution. So we work with a variety of partners, from sensor makers to startups to SME, working closely with the customer, craft out IoT solutions. So at ST, I mean, grants is a good way to bring people together. For example, if you look at HDB, they throw out like City of Tomorrow grants. Through that, we work with IHL, and work with startup, and everybody comes together and create a solution. And of course, like what Yvonne mentioned just now, in terms of the innovative IoT as a service solution from SPTEL, I think that is a very good platform whereby we can engage startups, and ecosystem partners to come together, and test bed their ideas and to solve a particular IoT problem. I think IoT is about tests, about test bedding ideas and creating a solution out of that. I think that is a very good avenue for everybody to come together. Thank you.
Thank you, Kok Hua, for sharing. I think we have time for probably some questions as well that is coming in from the audience. So I think one of the questions that I see here is that probably this we can go back to Yifang first. In your view, how can organizations embrace IoT to stay relevant in this pandemic situation and innovate at scale? I think early on you mentioned a little bit about that as well. So maybe you could give us a bit more insight into that.
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to how do we meet the changing customer needs in the face of a low-touch environment, in terms of customers also starting to be very aware about being able to keep safe as they do transactions and interactions, going about doing their daily lives, right? So as businesses, as we think about how we can continue to meet those needs, right? That could be one way to start to think about where some of the IoT related applications may then make sense. So that's where I think people can start.
I see. Chin Chow, would you like to also chime in on this question?
Okay, so being pragmatic, organizations post-pandemic have to really watch their cash flow, right? So in order to innovate at low cost, well, SPTEL has the trial program right now for you, right? It's going to run for months. At the same time, as a service model is going to help, right? You're not going to have heavy upfront capex investment, right? In case anything doesn't go well, right? So that you can still move on to the next project. So I think with the trial program and our as a service model is going to be very relevant for this post-pandemic era. Thanks.
Thank you. I see here another question as well on how the pandemic has changed the IoT landscape in terms of end user requirement. And I think this is quite relevant, I think, from a smart nation perspective. I think to the end users, IoT is actually not that visible to them, right? The only thing visible to them is more of end consumer home automation devices where they're plugged in and they use their Google Home or their Alexa to control devices. So I think it's really more of how different organizations, all right, can actually utilize IoT and create new services in which even the end users might not even know that IoT is being employed. So I think maybe for Kok Hua, earlier on you mentioned about telemedicine as well as with urban farming. How do you think this will impact people in terms of the end consumer, the people that's actually buying the vegetables? When they actually buy the vegetable, they think, oh, this is actually enabled by IoT. What do you think about this?
I guess at the end of the day, we're trying to use IoT to solve a problem. You know, in this particular, let's say we just talk about urban farming, we talk about increasing the yield of the crop. You know, if you increase the yield, practically speaking, the price of the vegetables should come down. But whether that actually happens, that is a different story altogether. But in general, that's what we're trying to do here. You know, and optimizing, let's say, the water usage, water consumption, energy usage. You know, all these in a way play a part in the overall cost of producing the vegetables, and hopefully that gets passed down to the end consumers. So that is in that perspective. So it's behind the scene.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, because I think the cost portion is definitely something that's very visible to end consumers, right? They will definitely ask about that more often than what actually is the technology behind it. I think there's one more question that I see here in the list. I think today there are several networking technologies that are being employed, right, for IoT. All right, and I think because of so many different technologies, as I presented earlier on as well, I think end users might actually have trouble selecting, you know, what should be best used. Should I use Bluetooth? Should I use LoRa? Maybe Teck Bing, you might want to be able to answer this question.
Okay, thank you so much, Vincent. Okay, as I mentioned earlier on, okay, in order to ensure the success of IoT adoption, okay, there's really a strong need for a reliable network connectivity. Okay, because as the size of the IoT bucket is going to grow, okay, thus it's very important for company to carefully examine their IoT connectivity providers. Okay, and basically they need to choose one with a strong record of service and also innovation. Okay, connecting so many devices will be one of the biggest challenge for IoT deployment. Okay, so basically this is my message is you need to select carefully so-called the connectivity and also basically the provider that can provide you this kind of connectivity. Okay, thank you so much, Vincent.
I think that's a good point. And speaking of connectivity, right, I think we have a question that says, how do we enable IoT environment in a very cost-effective manner, right, for a building with limited connectivity infrastructure, right? Because I think buildings comes in all shapes and sizes, and like what Teck Bing rightly pointed out, you need to be able to know what is best suited for whichever connectivity infrastructure. Maybe I'd like to direct this question to Ching Chao. Would you be able to help shed some light on this question?
Yeah, thanks, Vincent. So I think this is really a real-world challenge that when it comes to in-building connectivity, right, could be limited. I guess the connectivity in question here might refer to mobile connectivity, right? Or else we could be talking about public Wi-Fi connectivity. Yes, that's true. But having said that, I think nowadays we do have, through our ecosystem of IoT partners and solution providers, there are so-called low power WAN gateways that you can actually install in building that is cost effective and provide good coverage for your IoT solutions. So for that, SBTel actually have tested a few make and models of indoor gateways in some of our endeavors in our trial programs as well. So I think definitely we should be able to overcome this challenge quite easily.
Thank you. I think maybe I have time for maybe one more question. Let me just see. Okay, there's one question directed to myself. Can you actually share how much more on IoT app that's being used in commercial marketing? Okay, I think earlier on in my presentation, I talked about the use of NFC tags with bus stop posters. That is actually one very limited way in which IoT can be used for marketing. I think for IoT in marketing, the kind of marketing that you want to see is the things that you see in your Minority Report kind of a movie, right? So in Minority Report, you've probably seen Tom Cruise walking around and the posters just change, and being very personalized. This form of marketing is called hyper-targeting. So hyper-targeting ads are actually enabled because they are tracking devices that are all over the place. So you've got, like, for example, a Bluetooth beacon that's actually placed there, and your phone actually interacts with it, sends an identifier so that the advertisement dynamically change to personalize it to your needs, right? So this is one very great example of how IoT can actually be deployed. In fact, if you go to Funan today, there is a form of IoT that's also being used in their mall directory, right? So this is using computer vision. So computer vision, as you know, is with edge compute. We can sort of process and determine what is your gender as well as your demographic. So from there, if you try out the mall directory there in Funan, you will find that they will actually suggest to you recommended products depending on your gender and your demographic. So if you're a lady, you go there, you will probably see your favorite shoes or your favorite clothes. If you're a guy, you'll probably give you some electronic products as well as maybe sports items as well. Okay, I think we have sort of come to the end of the Q&A segment. Let me check if I still have more time. Okay, I think we have enough time to answer all the questions already. So apologies for some of those questions that I'm not able to answer. So maybe right now we'll just do a roundup on the panel discussion from each of the panelists. So maybe we'll begin with Yifang.
Thanks, Vincent. Actually, you have covered quite a wide range of points today already. And so to me, the next step is really a call to action for enterprises who are actually thinking about deploying IoT solutions or have IoT solutions that are now trying to come to the market. Just take the step forward and proceed. And we hope to see more solutions coming on as we go towards the end of the year. Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you. Next, Kok Hua, what would you sum up this panel discussion with?
I guess at the end of the day, I mean, this COVID-19 crisis is unprecedented. So I guess all organizations right now need to rethink and relook at some of the business processes because during the circuit breaker, I mean, the lockdown period, you notice there's a manpower crunch. A lot of things can't proceed because there's no manpower. Like even reading the readings of the water meters and electricity meters. So I would guess that a lot of organizations really need to rethink, relook at the processes, and see whether you can use IoT to automate some of these tasks. This very manpower intensive and repetitive tasks. I think that's the way to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Teck Bing?
Okay, thank you so much, Vincent. Okay, just now I mentioned about the IoT Open Innovation Committee in NYP. Okay, I would say action speak more than word. Why don't you join our IoT committee now? Okay, this committee actually bring together enterprise, technology partners, research and knowledge institutes, and also relevant industry to explore and experiment, and also can cooperate so-called the potential of the IoT for new business innovation opportunities and also the growth. Okay, thank you so much, Vincent.
Thank you. Last but not least, Chin Chow, how would you sum up today's panelist discussion?
Right. I think the challenges are there for post-pandemic, but nonetheless, the resources are also there. And SBTEL is here to support with our platform, with our trial program, as well as our community of partners to help you succeed. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all my esteemed panelists. I think that's all the time we have for us today.